Jasmine Washington's blood trickled down her cheek as the white executive's hand left a burning imprint. Her private jet fell silent. 20 years building Washington Aerospace to touch the sky, and now this. She tasted copper, smiled coldly, and pressed the hidden recording button on her watch. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you believe in standing up against injustice, and subscribe to catch more incredible true stories of resilience and revenge. Now, let's see how Jasmine Washington turned this moment of humiliation into the greatest power move of her career. Long before Jasmine Washington owned a private jet with her company logo emblazoned on its tail, she was just another little girl with big dreams in South Chicago. Raised in a modest two-bedroom apartment by her grandmother Beatrice after losing both parents in a tragic car accident when she was only 7, Jasmine learned early that life offered no guarantees. Beatrice Washington worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. A former schoolteacher who had given up her career to raise her granddaughter, Beatrice instilled in Jasmine the belief that education was the one thing nobody could take away from you. "Your mind is your greatest asset," she would tell Jasmine every night before bed. "Fill it with knowledge, and you'll never go hungry." By 3rd grade, Jasmine's exceptional intelligence had caught the attention of her teacher, Mr. Davis. Unlike other educators who seemed indifferent to the quiet black girl who always finished her work early, Mr. Davis recognized something special. He began bringing advanced math problems and science books specifically for Jasmine, nurturing her natural aptitude for numbers and analytical thinking. "You've got the mind of an engineer," he told her one day after she had disassembled and reassembled the classroom clock out of curiosity. "The world needs more people who can see how things work and make them better." Those words planted a seed that would grow throughout her academic career. When Jasmine graduated as valedictorian of her high school class, Mr. Davis sat proudly next to Beatrice at the ceremony. His recommendation letter had helped secure Jasmine a full scholarship to MIT's aerospace engineering program. College presented challenges beyond academics. As one of only 3 black women in her engineering cohort, Jasmine encountered both subtle and overt racism daily. Professors who never called on her in class despite her raised hand. Study groups that mysteriously had no room for another member. A faculty advisor who suggested she might be more comfortable in a less demanding program. "They don't expect you to succeed," Beatrice reminded her during their weekly calls. "That's your advantage. When people underestimate you, they never see you coming." Jasmine graduated summa cum laude, with job offers from 3 top aerospace companies. She chose Harrison Aviation, excited to put her theoretical knowledge into practice designing commercial aircraft systems. The excitement faded quickly. For 5 years, Jasmine watched less qualified colleagues receive promotions while she remained in her entry-level position despite consistently exceptional performance reviews. The final straw came when she overheard her supervisor taking credit for her revolutionary fuel efficiency algorithm during a presentation to the board. That night, Jasmine made a decision that would change her life. Instead of fighting for recognition within a system designed to hold her back, she would build her own system. Using her savings and a small loan from her grandmother, Jasmine founded Washington Aerospace in a tiny rented office with just 2 other employees, a brilliant programmer she had befriended at MIT who had faced similar discrimination, and a veteran administrative assistant who had been passed over for advancement at Harrison because of her age. The early days were grueling. They survived on small consulting contracts while Jasmine refined her fuel efficiency technology into a marketable product. Many nights she slept on the office couch, too tired to make the trip home and too dedicated to waste time commuting. Their breakthrough came when a mid-size airline took a chance on implementing Jasmine's system, resulting in a 23% reduction in fuel costs. The industry noticed. Within 5 years, Washington Aerospace had grown to 50 employees and moved to proper headquarters. By year 10, they had expanded internationally. Year 15 saw them developing proprietary aircraft designs in addition to systems. Now, at the 20-year mark, Washington Aerospace had become a billion-dollar enterprise with over 3,000 employees worldwide. Throughout the company's growth, Jasmine maintained her grandmother's ethics. She instituted progressive hiring practices, mentorship programs for underrepresented groups in aviation, and a corporate culture that valued innovation regardless of its source. But she also developed a reputation for brilliant business strategy and ruthless efficiency when necessary. Competitors learned quickly that her perfect memory extended to every slight and broken promise. In this industry, you have to be twice as good to get half as far, she often told new employees who came from backgrounds similar to hers. But once you get there, you can change the rules of the game. The recent acquisition of Stryker Aviation represented the pinnacle of Washington Aerospace's rise. Stryker was old money, old technology, and old thinking, a company that had never imagined it would one day be owned by a black woman. The integration meeting scheduled aboard Jasmine's custom-designed corporate jet was meant to set the tone for the merged company's future. No one, least of all Jasmine, anticipated just how true that would prove to be. The gleaming white Washington Aerospace jet stood on the tarmac at LAX, sunlight reflecting off its polished surface. The company logo, a stylized W with wings, adorned the tail in metallic blue. For Jasmine, the aircraft represented more than luxury or status, it was a flying testament to her company's engineering excellence, incorporating numerous proprietary technologies developed under her leadership. As Jasmine ascended the stairs to board, she paused briefly to straighten her immaculately tailored navy suit. At 45, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had built something extraordinary through sheer determination and brilliance. Her natural hair was styled in a short, professional cut that framed her face, accentuating sharp cheekbones and penetrating brown eyes that missed nothing. Inside, the jet's interior reflected Jasmine's practical approach to luxury. The cabin was spacious but designed for productivity, with state-of-the-art communication systems and comfortable seating arranged to facilitate discussion. The Washington Aerospace executive team had arrived early to prepare. Terrence Brooks, Jasmine's loyal COO and friend since their MIT days, reviewed notes at a small conference table. At 46, Terrence had been with Washington Aerospace from the beginning, turning down numerous lucrative offers from competitors over the years. As a black man in aviation, he shared many of Jasmine's experiences with discrimination, creating a bond that went beyond professional respect. "Ready for this?" he asked as Jasmine took her seat. "Born ready," she replied with the confident smile that had become her trademark in business negotiations. Amber Chen, Washington Aerospace's chief legal officer, sat across from them, meticulously organizing contract documents. Brilliant and methodical, Amber had joined the company 5 years earlier after recognizing that Washington Aerospace represented the future of the industry. Derek Sullivan, head of security and a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, stood discreetly near the cabin entrance. His presence was standard procedure for high-level meetings, though in the company's 20-year history, there had never been a security incident requiring intervention. At precisely 10 a.m., the Stryker Aviation delegation arrived. Harold Bennett, Stryker's CFO and third-generation aviation industry veteran, led the group. Tall and silver-haired with an aristocratic bearing, Bennett represented the old guard of American aviation, wealthy, connected, and accustomed to deference. His handshake was firm but brief as he greeted Jasmine. "Ms. Washington," he said, his tone cordial but lacking warmth. "Impressive aircraft." "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," Jasmine replied. "We're particularly proud of the noise reduction technology. I'm sure you noticed the difference during takeoff." Bennett nodded without elaborating, then introduced his team, 4 vice presidents and his right-hand man, Ryan Caldwell. While the VPs maintained professional demeanors, Caldwell's hostility was evident from the first handshake. His grip was unnecessarily tight, his smile never reaching his eyes as he assessed Jasmine. "Quite a setup you've got here," Caldwell remarked, his tone suggesting surprise rather than admiration. "Stryker's executives fly commercial. Keeps us connected to our customers' experience." The implication was clear: Washington Aerospace was wasteful, out of touch. Jasmine had encountered this tactic before, the suggestion that her success represented excess rather than achievement. "We consider this aircraft a working laboratory," she responded smoothly. "Many of the technologies we sell are tested right here before market implementation. Please, everyone take a seat. We'll begin once we reach cruising altitude." As the jet taxied and took off, Jasmine observed the dynamics of the Stryker team. Bennett maintained a posture of polite engagement, while Caldwell seemed unable to conceal his resentment. The four VPs followed Bennett's lead, though Jasmine noted two of them exchanged glances when Caldwell spoke, suggesting internal divisions within Stryker's leadership. Once they reached cruising altitude, Jasmine began her presentation, outlining her vision for the merged companies. Using the cabin's advanced display system, she showed projected growth numbers, market opportunities, and integration timelines. Her delivery was confident, concise, and backed by exhaustive research into Stryker's operations. "As you can see," she concluded the first segment, "this merger represents an opportunity to combine Stryker's established market presence with Washington Aerospace's innovative technologies. The resulting entity will be uniquely positioned to dominate the next generation of aviation advancements." Bennett nodded thoughtfully, but before he could respond, Caldwell interjected. "These projections assume we adopt your systems wholesale," he said, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "Stryker has its own R&D pipeline. Our customers trust our brand because of our traditional approach to aviation." "I've reviewed Stryker's R&D portfolio thoroughly," Jasmine replied, pulling up specific data points that highlighted the stagnation in Stryker's innovation metrics. "Your last significant patent was filed 8 years ago. Meanwhile, fuel costs have increased by 32%. The market is evolving, Mr. Caldwell." As the discussion progressed to specific integration points, Caldwell's interruptions became more frequent and disrespectful. When Jasmine explained that Washington's more efficient supply chain management system would replace Stryker's outdated processes, Caldwell audibly scoffed. "We've managed our supply chain the same way for 30 years, he said. "It works fine." "Actually," Terrence interjected, displaying comparative efficiency metrics, "our system reduces procurement costs by 18% while improving delivery reliability. The data speaks for itself." Caldwell's face hardened at Terrence's input. "And you are?" "Terrence Brooks. Chief Operating Officer," Terrence replied evenly. "Right," Caldwell said dismissively before turning back to Jasmine. "Look, we understand Washington Aerospace has had some success with smaller airlines and developing markets. But Stryker deals with major international carriers. It's a different league entirely." The tension in the cabin escalated when the discussion moved to personnel changes. Jasmine explained that the merger would eliminate redundancies while preserving as many jobs as possible. When she announced that Stryker's procurement division would report to Terrence in the new organization, Caldwell's face flushed red. "You expect our senior directors to report to," he stopped himself, but the implication hung in the air. "To report to the chief operating officer of the parent company," Jasmine finished for him, her voice remaining professional despite the obvious subtext. "Yes, that's standard in acquisitions of this nature." Bennett, seemingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, attempted to redirect. "Perhaps we should discuss the timeline for integration before getting into reporting structures." But Caldwell was no longer containing his anger. "This is ridiculous. Stryker Aviation was founded by my grandfather's generation. We built commercial aviation in this country. And now we're supposed to hand over control to..." He gestured vaguely at Jasmine and Terrence. "To the company that acquired yours through legitimate business channels," Jasmine stated calmly. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, that's exactly what's happening. Your algorithms and cost-cutting might impress the board and shareholders," Caldwell continued, standing up suddenly. "But everyone in this industry knows what's really happening. Diversity initiatives and government contracts reserved for minority-owned businesses. That's the only reason Washington Aerospace exists." The cabin fell silent. Even Bennett looked shocked at Caldwell's outburst. Jasmine remained seated, her expression unchanged. "Mr. Caldwell, I'd advise you to sit down and reconsider your approach to this discussion, she said quietly. Instead, Caldwell stepped closer. My father warned me about people like you. Taking what you haven't earned. Playing the victim while you steal opportunities from people who've spent generations building something real. Derek Sullivan moved forward slightly, but Jasmine subtly raised her hand, stopping him. You got lucky with one algorithm, Caldwell continued, his voice rising. The rest is affirmative action and guilt politics. You aren't qualified to run Stryker. You aren't qualified to run any aviation company. You're just a diversity hire who got lucky. What happened next occurred so quickly that several witnesses would later recall it differently. Caldwell leaned down toward Jasmine, using his height to intimidate, and uttered a racial slur. Then, as if the verbal assault wasn't sufficient, he swung his open hand and slapped her across the face with enough force that her head turned sharply. The sound of the slap seemed to echo in the pressurized cabin. Derek lunged forward immediately, restraining Caldwell's arms behind his back with practiced efficiency. The Stryker VPs sat frozen in shock. Bennett half stood, his face pale with horror. And Jasmine? She slowly turned her face back, a small trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth where her lip had caught against her teeth. Her expression showed no fear, no shock, only a cold, calculating assessment. She dabbed the blood with a white handkerchief, leaving a bright red stain against the fabric. Then she smiled. Not a smile of amusement or forgiveness, but the smile of a predator who has just watched prey walk willingly into a trap. Thank you for showing us exactly who you are, Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice steady as she subtly pressed the recording button on her watch. I believe this meeting has been more illuminating than any of us anticipated. The Washington Aerospace jet's cabin remained in suspended animation for 3 seconds after Jasmine's words. Derek held Caldwell immobilized, his marine training evident in a calm, controlled restraint that nevertheless left the Stryker executive unable to move. The 4 Stryker VPs sat rigid in their seats, faces displaying variations of shock and dismay. Bennett stood halfway between sitting and standing, as if uncertain whether intervention was possible or wise. Jasmine broke the silence. Derek, please escort Mr. Caldwell to the rear cabin and ensure he remains there. Her voice betrayed no emotion, though the red mark on her cheek was darkening visibly. Yes, ma'am, Derek replied, professionally guiding the still fuming Caldwell toward the back of the aircraft. You can't do this, Caldwell protested, struggling ineffectively against Derek's grip. Bennett, say something. This is kidnapping. Bennett finally found his voice. For God's sake, Ryan, shut up. You've done enough. He turned to Jasmine, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and calculation. Ms. Washington, I cannot begin to express my shock and apologies for this inexcusable behavior. I assure you it does not reflect Stryker Aviation's values or standards. Jasmine regarded him coolly. Interesting. I've reviewed your company culture quite thoroughly during due diligence, Mr. Bennett. This incident seems entirely consistent with Stryker's internal communications and historical treatment of minorities in your organization. She pressed the intercom button. Captain Lewis, please divert to Denver International. We have a situation requiring law enforcement assistance. Bennett blanched. Surely we can handle this internally. There's no need for. A physical assault occurred on my aircraft, Jasmine interrupted. Safety protocols are clear. Terrence moved to sit beside Jasmine, speaking quietly. Do you need medical attention? That's going to bruise. Jasmine shook her head slightly. I'm fine. She turned to Amber. Please document everything. I want statements from everyone on this aircraft before we land. The next 45 minutes passed in tense silence. The Stryker executives huddled together, occasionally whispering urgently. Bennett made several attempts to approach Jasmine but was politely intercepted by Terrence each time. Jasmine herself sat reviewing documents on her tablet as if the incident had been merely an inconvenient interruption. When the aircraft landed in Denver, 2 police officers and an airport security team were waiting on the tarmac. Derek escorted a now subdued Caldwell to the cabin door. "Ms. Washington," one officer said as he boarded, "we understand there's been an assault. Would you like to make a statement?" All eyes turned to Jasmine, who stood with perfect posture despite the now prominent bruise on her cheek. "Mr. Caldwell assaulted me during our business meeting. There are multiple witnesses." She gestured to the cabin security cameras. "And video evidence, which my team will provide to your department." The officer nodded, turning to Caldwell. "Sir, you'll need to come with us." Caldwell looked desperately at Bennett. "Harold, don't let them do this. It was a misunderstanding. Tell them." Bennett avoided his gaze. "Ryan, just go with them. We'll sort this out later." As the officers escorted Caldwell off the aircraft, Bennett approached Jasmine. "Ms. Washington, I want to personally assure you that Caldwell will be terminated immediately. Stryker Aviation does not condone his actions in any way." "That's a start," Jasmine replied, her tone businesslike. "But hardly addresses the root issues." "Perhaps we should postpone the remainder of today's meeting," Bennett suggested. "Give everyone time to process this unfortunate incident." Jasmine studied him for a moment. "No, I don't think so. My time is valuable, Mr. Bennett, and we have a merger to finalize. Unless you're suggesting Stryker wishes to breach the acquisition agreement." Bennett's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing surprise at her response. "Of course not. I just thought, given the circumstances." "The circumstances being that one of your executives physically assaulted me?" Jasmine asked, her voice remaining calm. "That reflects on him and potentially on Stryker's culture, but it doesn't change our business objectives. We'll resume our meeting once we're airborne again." Bennett retreated, conferring urgently with his remaining team. Meanwhile, Terrence approached Jasmine with concern. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "We could reschedule, approach this with a clear strategy after what just happened." Jasmine led him to a private corner of the cabin. "This isn't a deviation from strategy, Terrence. It's an opportunity." "An opportunity?" Terrence looked incredulous. "Jasmine, he assaulted you in front of witnesses. We should press charges, take legal action." "And what would that accomplish?" Jasmine asked. "A public court case where I'm painted as either a victim or an opportunist. Where Caldwell claims he was provoked, that I manipulated the situation." She shook her head. "No. I'm playing a longer game." "What exactly are you planning?" Terrence's expression showed concern mixed with the trust built over decades of friendship. "You know what my grandmother always said about revenge," Jasmine replied. Terrence nodded. "Serve it cold, methodically, and so completely they never recover." "Exactly." A small, tight smile crossed Jasmine's face. "Caldwell just gave us the leverage to dismantle Stryker's old boys network completely. But not through a simple assault charge that gets pleaded down to nothing. We're going to expose everything." The aircraft was refueled, and after providing preliminary statements to Denver police, the meeting resumed in the air minus Caldwell. Jasmine returned to her presentation as if nothing had happened, walking the Stryker executives through each integration point with meticulous detail. The remaining Stryker team, clearly unsettled by her composure, offered minimal resistance to her proposals. By the time they began their descent into New York, Jasmine had secured agreement on every significant point of the integration plan, with terms distinctly favorable to Washington Aerospace. Bennett, attempting to salvage some control, suggested a joint press release about the merger that made no mention of the incident. "My team will handle all communications regarding today's events and the merger," Jasmine replied, brooking no discussion. "We land in 20 minutes. I suggest you prepare your board for significant changes." Only after the Stryker executives had departed and the Washington team was alone did Jasmine finally let her guard down. She sat heavily in her seat, accepting the ice pack Amber had discreetly prepared. "You were incredible," Amber said, her admiration evident. "I don't know how you maintained that level of focus after what happened." "Practice," Jasmine replied, the single word carrying the weight of countless previous incidents throughout her career. She held the ice pack to her cheek, finally allowing herself to feel the throbbing pain. Terrence sat across from her. "What now?" "Now," Jasmine said, her voice showing fatigue for the first time, "I call my grandmother." Later that evening, in the privacy of her Manhattan penthouse, Jasmine spoke to Beatrice Washington on a secure line. Despite being 85, Beatrice's mind remained sharp, her wisdom undiminished by age. "He did what?" Beatrice's voice rose in indignation when Jasmine recounted the incident. "Slapped me in front of both executive teams," Jasmine confirmed. "Because I had the audacity to tell him his department would report to Terrence in the new organization." "Lord, give me strength," Beatrice murmured. "Are you pressing charges?" "No," Jasmine replied. "Not yet, anyway. A simple assault charge isn't enough." There was a pause before Beatrice spoke again. "You're going to destroy him, aren't you? Him and anyone who enabled him." "I'm going to do what you taught me, Grandma," Jasmine said, the childhood term of endearment slipping out. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And then make sure they never have the power to hurt anyone else. Just remember what else I taught you," Beatrice cautioned. "Don't let revenge consume you. You've built something too important to risk it all on one man's ignorance." "I won't," Jasmine promised. "But this isn't just about me or what happened today. It's about making sure the next black woman doesn't have to face what I did." After ending the call, Jasmine stood at her window overlooking the city lights. The bruise on her face throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat as she mentally crafted a strategy that went far beyond simple revenge. By the time she finally slept, she had formulated a multi-layered plan that would transform not just Stryker Aviation, but potentially the culture of the entire industry. Caldwell's slap wouldn't just cost him his career. It would become the catalyst for changes he and Bennett couldn't begin to imagine. The first online mention of the incident appeared on Aviat Week, a niche industry blog, just 16 hours after the Washington aerospace jet landed in New York. The post was brief and notably skeptical. "Rumor, trouble for Washington Stryker merger." Sources claim personality conflict erupted during executive meeting. Washington Aerospace CEO Jasmine Washington allegedly involved in heated exchange with Stryker executive. Both companies declined to comment. Jasmine's communications team flagged the post immediately. From her office in Washington Aerospace's Manhattan headquarters, she read it with a calculated expression, the bruise on her cheek now covered with expertly applied makeup. "They're testing the waters," she told Amber, who sat across from her desk. "Trying to frame it as a personality conflict rather than an assault." "Classic minimization strategy," Amber agreed. "Bennett's people are likely behind it." "Let them run with that narrative for now," Jasmine replied. "It shows their hand." Throughout the day, similar stories appeared on other aviation and business news sites, each carefully worded to suggest mutual responsibility without directly stating what had occurred. Wall Street analysts began questioning whether the merger was at risk, causing slight fluctuations in both companies' stock prices. Stryker issued a brief statement by mid-afternoon. Stryker Aviation remains committed to the merger with Washington Aerospace. A frank exchange of views occurred during integration planning, reflecting the passion both teams bring to the aviation industry. "We look forward to finalizing the merger as scheduled." The carefully crafted non-apology confirmed Jasmine's suspicions about their strategy. She gathered her core team, Terrence, Amber, and Zoe Bailey, Washington Aerospace's head of communications, in her office. "They're going to paint this as a misunderstanding between equals," Jasmine said. "Time to change the narrative." Zoe nodded. "We've prepared statements, but without video, it's our word against theirs." Jasmine smiled slightly. "Who says we don't have video?" She pulled up footage from the jet's security system on her monitor. The high-definition video clearly showed the entire incident from multiple angles, including Caldwell's racial slur, captured with audio, and the physical assault. Select 3 journalists, Jasmine instructed. 1 mainstream business reporter with impeccable credentials. 1 from aviation media. And 1 from a publication focused on diversity in business. Send them this footage with our statement. Terrence looked concerned. Are you sure? Once this is out there. That's exactly the point, Jasmine replied. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. By evening, the video had gone viral. What began as careful reporting in 3 respected publications exploded across social media and cable news. The clear footage left no room for interpretation. A white male executive had used a racial slur and physically assaulted a black female CEO during a business meeting on her own corporate aircraft. Public reaction divided along predictable lines. Outrage dominated most responses, with hashtags like #StandWithJasmine and #CorporateRacism trending worldwide. Business leaders issued statements condemning violence and discrimination. Aviation industry groups distanced themselves from Caldwell and Stryker. But there was also the inevitable backlash. Comment sections filled with people questioning whether Jasmine had provoked the incident, whether the slap was really that bad, and suggesting the video had been edited to remove context. Several right-wing commentators suggested Jasmine was playing the race card to gain leverage in the merger. What's your take on this situation? Comment number 1 if you believe Jasmine was right to release the video evidence, or number 2 if you think she should have handled it privately. Hit that like button if you admire her composure after being assaulted, and subscribe to see how this incredible story of corporate justice unfolds. But wait until you see what Stryker did next. Stryker Aviation's response came the following morning, a formal statement expressing deep concern about the incident and announcing Caldwell's immediate termination. The carefully worded press release noted that Caldwell's actions do not reflect Stryker Aviation's values, but stopped short of a direct apology to Jasmine or acknowledgement of the racial component. Wall Street analysts began speculating about whether the merger would proceed, with several suggesting the incident might provide Washington Aerospace grounds to renegotiate terms. Stryker's stock dropped 7% by midday trading. Meanwhile, Washington Aerospace's communications team monitored social media, identifying a coordinated campaign emerging from accounts with connections to Stryker. These posts suggested Jasmine had a history of playing hardball and provoking confrontations to gain business advantages. More concerning was the discovery of Caldwell's emerging counternarrative. Released on bail and represented by a high-profile attorney, he issued a statement claiming he had been deliberately provoked, and that the video fails to show the complete context. Several conservative media outlets began running stories framing Caldwell as the victim of cancel culture. They're trying to make this about anything except what it actually is, Terrence observed during their strategy meeting. A white man assaulting a black woman because he couldn't accept her authority. The situation intensified when Washington Aerospace's team discovered someone had accessed employment records at Jasmine's former company, Harrison Aviation, presumably seeking dirt to discredit her. Simultaneously, several financial news sites began questioning whether Washington Aerospace's growth had been artificially inflated by government contracts awarded under diversity initiatives. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, Amber noted. Classic crisis management misdirection. Jasmine had remained notably silent throughout the media frenzy, letting the video and her company's initial statement speak for themselves. This calculated restraint only increased public interest in her perspective. 7 days after the incident, she agreed to a single television interview with a respected business journalist known for tough but fair reporting. Rather than conducting the interview from her office, Jasmine chose the Washington Aerospace Research Center where young engineers from diverse backgrounds were developing next-generation technologies. The interview was a masterclass in controlled messaging. Dressed in a simple but elegant burgundy suit, Jasmine appeared composed and thoughtful. The bruise on her cheek, still faintly visible despite makeup, served as a silent testament to the incident without her needing to draw attention to it. "I didn't release that video to destroy a career or a company," she explained when asked about her decision. "I released it because silence around these incidents allows them to continue. How many women, particularly women of color, face this kind of treatment without video evidence? How many stay silent because they fear the consequences of speaking up?" When the interviewer asked whether the incident reflected broader issues in the aviation industry, Jasmine was measured yet direct. "Aviation has historically been one of the least diverse sectors in American business. That's not opinion, it's statistical fact. What happened on my aircraft didn't occur in a vacuum. It was the product of an industry culture that has often viewed diversity as a threat rather than an asset." The most powerful moment came when she addressed Caldwell directly. "I don't hate Mr. Caldwell. I don't even know him personally. What I oppose is the system that made him believe he could act that way without consequences. My grandmother taught me that you don't let someone else's hatred define your success. I built Washington Aerospace on that principle, and will complete this merger on that same foundation." The interview went viral immediately, with Jasmine's quote about "not letting someone else's hatred define my success" becoming a rallying cry across social media. Washington Aerospace's stock rose 4% by closing bell, while Stryker's continued its decline. Meanwhile, Jasmine's team had been quietly investigating Caldwell's history. They discovered he had a pattern of aggressive behavior toward women and minorities throughout his career, incidents that had been systematically covered up by previous employers, including Stryker. 3 former Stryker employees, all women of color, confidentially shared stories of harassment they had experienced from Caldwell but had been afraid to report. More damaging was the discovery that Caldwell's discriminatory attitudes weren't isolated within Stryker. Internal emails revealed a corporate culture that routinely marginalized minority employees and dismissed their contributions. Several major government and international contracts had been secured through connections rather than competitive bidding, relationships maintained through private clubs that explicitly excluded women and minorities until forced to change their policies. "This goes beyond one man's actions," Jasmine told Terrence as they reviewed the findings. "It's exactly what we suspected, systematic discrimination embedded in their corporate DNA." "What's our next move?" Terrence asked. Jasmine gazed out her office window at the Manhattan skyline. "Bennett thinks this will blow over. That I'll accept Caldwell as a sacrificial lamb and everything returns to business as usual." She turned back to face her oldest friend and ally. "He's about to learn how wrong he is." On Monday morning, 3 weeks after the assault, Jasmine walked through the main entrance of Washington Aerospace's Manhattan headquarters. The security team, accustomed to her arriving through the executive entrance, looked surprised. More surprising was her decision to take the main elevator with regular employees rather than the express lift reserved for executives. Word of her presence spread quickly. As Jasmine stepped off the elevator on the operations floor, the usual buzz of activity momentarily halted. Then, spontaneously, employees began to applaud. The applause spread across the open office space, growing into a standing ovation as Jasmine made her way through the floor. She hadn't planned this moment, but she recognized its significance. This wasn't just support for her personally, it was a collective statement about dignity in the workplace. Jasmine acknowledged the demonstration with a graceful nod before continuing to her office, where her executive team awaited. "Apparently I've been missed," she said as she closed the door. "You've become something of an icon," Zoe informed her. "The video has over 20 million views now. #COS Against Harassment is trending, with executives across industries pledging zero tolerance for workplace discrimination. Let's hope that translates to actual change," Jasmine replied, setting down her briefcase. "What's the latest from Stryker?" Terrence handed her a printed email. "Bennett wants to talk. Says the merger remains on track but requests adjustments to certain terms given the current climate." Jasmine scanned the email, her expression hardening. Translation: "They want concessions because they think I'm afraid the merger will fail after the incident." She set the paper down. Have our financial team found anything in their deeper dive? Amber nodded, pulling up documents on the conference room screen. Stryker's last quarterly report glossed over significant issues. Their government contracts division is underperforming, and they're facing potential penalties for missed deadlines on the military transport project. 3 of their commercial airline clients are considering non-renewal due to quality control issues. In other words, Jasmine summarized, they need this merger more than they're admitting. Significantly more, Amber confirmed. Without our technology and manufacturing improvements, Stryker could face serious financial challenges within 18 months. Jasmine absorbed this information, her mind already formulating the next steps. Bennett's playing hardball despite holding a weak hand. Time to show him ours. She outlined her comprehensive response strategy to the team. First, Washington Aerospace would reject any proposed changes to the merger terms, citing the legally binding agreement already in place. Second, they would strategically leak information about Stryker's financial vulnerabilities to key industry analysts. Third, Jasmine would personally meet with individual Stryker board members, bypassing Bennett entirely. Isn't that overstepping? Zoe questioned. Bennett is still officially running Stryker until the merger finalizes. On paper, yes, Jasmine acknowledged. But several board members have already reached out privately to express concerns about his leadership in light of the incident. They're worried about shareholder lawsuits if the merger falls through because of Stryker's cultural issues. The strategy was implemented with precision over the following days. When the first analyst reports questioning Stryker's financial stability appeared in business publications, Bennett called Jasmine directly. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his cultivated polish cracking. "These anonymous sources are clearly coming from your team." "I have no control over independent financial analysis, Harold," Jasmine replied calmly. Perhaps if Stryker had been more transparent about its challenges, analysts wouldn't be discovering them now. "You're deliberately tanking our stock to force concessions," Bennett accused. "No," Jasmine corrected. "I'm insisting on the original terms of a merger agreement your team signed willingly. The market is simply responding to information that should have been disclosed during due diligence." Before Bennett could respond, Jasmine continued. "By the way, I'm having dinner with Robert Winters from your board tomorrow night. He seems quite concerned about potential shareholder liability if this merger fails due to Stryker's cultural issues." The silence on the other end of the line told Jasmine all she needed to know. Bennett hadn't been aware of board members meeting with her independently. Over the next week, Jasmine met with 6 of Stryker's 9 board members. To each, she presented evidence of questionable practices under Bennett's leadership. The systematic covering up of harassment complaints, manipulated performance metrics, and contracts secured through connections rather than competitive value. "I'm not sharing this to torpedo the merger," she assured each board member. "On the contrary, I believe the combined company has tremendous potential. But that potential can only be realized with a clean break from these practices." The strategy was working. Washington Aerospace stock rose steadily while Stryker's continued to decline. Industry publications began speculating about a leadership shakeup at Stryker prior to the merger's completion. Then, in the midst of this corporate chess match, Jasmine received devastating personal news. Her grandmother Beatrice had suffered a severe stroke after watching a particularly vicious cable news segment about the incident that had painted Jasmine as an opportunist using the race card for business advantage. Jasmine immediately flew to Chicago, where Beatrice had been admitted to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The sight of her grandmother, the woman who had raised her, inspired her, and taught her to navigate a world that often saw her as less than equal, connected to machines and unresponsive, shook Jasmine to her core. The stroke was extensive, the neurologist explained gently. At her age, recovery is uncertain. We'll know more in the next 48 hours. For the first time since the incident on the jet, Jasmine felt truly vulnerable. She sat beside Beatrice's hospital bed, holding her grandmother's frail hand, the beeping monitors providing a rhythmic backdrop to her tumultuous thoughts. "I don't know if I can do this without you," she whispered. Everything I've built, everything I am, it started with you believing in me." Terrence arrived the following morning, insisting Jasmine take a break while he sat with Beatrice. In the hospital cafeteria, he updated her on developments at both companies. "Bennett's getting desperate," he reported. "He's trying to rally support from major shareholders, claiming you're conducting a personal vendetta that threatens the merger's value." Jasmine stirred her untouched coffee. Maybe he's right. Maybe this has become personal. Terrence studied his oldest friend carefully. "Are you having doubts?" "Not about Bennett or what needs to be done at Stryker," Jasmine clarified. "But about the cost. My grandmother is lying upstairs because some talking head twisted this story into something ugly. Is it worth it?" "You know what Beatrice would say," Terrence reminded her gently. Jasmine nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. "That backing down when you're right only ensures you'll have to fight the same battle again later." "Exactly. And that some things are worth fighting for, even when they come with a cost." Jasmine returned to Beatrice's bedside with renewed clarity. While maintaining her hospital vigil, she continued directing Washington Aerospace's response to Bennett's increasingly desperate maneuvers. She conducted video conferences from a private room the hospital provided, reviewing documents and approving strategies between consultations with Beatrice's medical team. On the third day, when it seemed the situation couldn't become more complex, Terrence discovered something that changed everything. Washington Aerospace's cybersecurity team had detected a sophisticated attempt to breach their systems, targeting specific files related to the merger and Jasmine's personal communications. More disturbing was the evidence linking the attempt to an IP address associated with a security firm Stryker had used for corporate intelligence in the past. This wasn't just corporate hardball, it was potentially illegal corporate espionage. Simultaneously, Terrence learned he was being followed by private investigators. When confronted, they refused to identify their client, but digital forensics on photos found in their possession connected them to the same security firm. "They're digging for anything they can use against us," Terrence told Jasmine during their secure call. "This goes beyond normal merger tensions." Jasmine absorbed this information with growing certainty that she'd uncovered only the surface of Stryker's problematic culture. The question was whether to continue the fight while her grandmother's condition remained critical. That question was answered the following morning when Beatrice regained consciousness briefly. Though unable to speak clearly due to the stroke's effects, she squeezed Jasmine's hand and managed 2 words that Jasmine understood perfectly: "Finish it." With renewed determination, Jasmine returned to New York, leaving Terrence to oversee Beatrice's care with a team of specialists. Upon her arrival, she made 2 crucial decisions that would irrevocably change the course of the merger. First, she authorized Amber to quietly meet with FBI agents specializing in corporate espionage, sharing evidence of the attempted system breach and surveillance activities. Second, she called an emergency meeting of Washington Aerospace's board to brief them fully on the situation with Stryker. The board unanimously backed her approach, with several members expressing concern that Stryker's culture problems ran deeper than initially understood. As these initiatives moved forward, Jasmine received the news that would transform her strategy from defensive to offensive. Amber's team had discovered that Ryan Caldwell's hiring at Stryker had been unusual. He'd been recruited from a competitor at Bennett's personal insistence, despite having less experience than other candidates. More significantly, they found communications suggesting Bennett had specifically instructed Caldwell to take an aggressive stance with Jasmine during integration planning. While these messages didn't explicitly direct physical assault, they created a clear pattern of Bennett using Caldwell as his proxy for confrontational tactics. He set this up, Jasmine realized, reviewing the evidence. Maybe not the slap specifically, but he put Caldwell in that meeting to provoke a reaction that could be used against me. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when financial forensics revealed Bennett had been positioning to trigger a specific clause in the merger agreement, one that would allow Stryker to exit the deal with minimal penalties if Washington Aerospace leadership engaged in conduct detrimental to the merged entity's reputation. "He was hoping I'd lose my temper," Jasmine told her executive team. "React in a way that could be framed as unprofessional or unstable." When that didn't work, Caldwell escalated to physical confrontation. The realization that Bennett had orchestrated the confrontation to collapse the merger on terms favorable to Stryker, potentially saving his own position in the process, transformed the situation from a case of individual misconduct to systematic corporate malfeasance. Jasmine's response was swift and comprehensive. That evening, she had a confidential meeting with senior FBI officials about potential securities fraud, market manipulation, and corporate espionage. By morning, the corporate battlefield had shifted dramatically, with Jasmine Washington no longer playing defense. The first signs of Bennett's coordinated campaign against Jasmine appeared in conservative business publications exactly 1 week after her meeting with the FBI. A profile piece questioned her academic credentials, suggesting she had received preferential treatment throughout her education due to diversity initiatives. Another outlet ran a story examining Washington Aerospace's government contracts, implying the company had been awarded work based on Jasmine's identity rather than competitive bidding. These were just the opening salvos. Within days, more damaging stories emerged. A tech blog published an exposé claiming Jasmine's revolutionary fuel efficiency algorithm, the innovation that had launched her company, had actually been developed by a team at Harrison Aviation and appropriated when she left. The source? Dr. Michael Foster, Jasmine's former boyfriend from MIT, who claimed she had taken credit for collaborative research. Foster received a substantial payment 3 days before that story broke, Amber reported, displaying the financial records her team had uncovered. Routed through 3 shell companies, but we traced it back to a fund Bennett controls. Jasmine absorbed this information with remarkable calm. They're following the playbook exactly as I predicted. Discredit my achievements, question my integrity, make this about anything except what actually happened on that plane. The pressure intensified when several major shareholders contacted Washington Aerospace's board expressing concerns about Jasmine's leadership during the crisis. The carefully worded messages followed suspiciously similar formats, suggesting coordination behind the scenes. Bennett's rallying his allies, Terrence observed. Trying to create the impression that the market is losing confidence in you. The attacks weren't limited to Jasmine's professional life. Anonymous threatening messages began appearing at both her Manhattan penthouse and Connecticut weekend home. Nothing explicitly violent, but ominous enough to require increased security. More concerning was the discovery of surveillance equipment in the lobby of her apartment building, positioned to track her movements. Derek Sullivan, reviewing the security footage, identified the individuals who had installed the devices as employees of the same firm that had been following Terrence. They're escalating, he warned. This goes beyond corporate intelligence gathering. Throughout this onslaught, Jasmine maintained her public composure, neither responding directly to allegations nor engaging with the increasingly hostile coverage. But privately, the strain was showing. The combination of leading Washington Aerospace through the crisis, fighting Bennett's coordinated attacks, and worrying about her grandmother's slow recovery was taking its toll. During a rare moment of vulnerability, she confided in Terrence. Maybe we should consider a settlement. Protect the company, protect the employees who depend on us. They were in her office late at night, reviewing the latest developments after most staff had departed. Terrence looked at his oldest friend with concern. Is that what you really want? Or is that exhaustion talking? Before Jasmine could answer, her secure phone rang, the line reserved for updates about Beatrice. She answered immediately, her face reflecting a range of emotions as she listened. When she ended the call, she sat in silence for several moments. Grandma's awake, she finally said. Still weak, but the doctors say she's showing remarkable improvement for someone her age. That's wonderful news, Terrence said, genuine relief in his voice. She asked about the situation with Stryker. Jasmine continued. I had the nurse hold the phone so she could hear me. I told her everything. Bennett's campaign against me, the pressure from shareholders, all of it. What did she say? A slow smile spread across Jasmine's face, the first genuine one Terrence had seen in weeks. She said, finish what you started, girl. Don't let them win after coming this far. The conversation marked a turning point. The following morning, Jasmine called an emergency meeting with her core team, Terrence, Amber, Zoe, and Derek. The time for defensive responses had ended. Bennett has made two critical miscalculations, she told them. First, he assumes I'm fighting to protect my reputation or position. I'm not. I'm fighting for something much larger than myself. And the second? Amber asked. He believes he understands who I am and what I'm capable of, Jasmine replied, her expression resolute. He's about to learn how wrong he is. She outlined her comprehensive counteroffensive, beginning with the bombshell discovery her team had made during deeper investigation into Stryker's practices. While searching for the source of the cyber attack on Washington Aerospace, they had uncovered a pattern of systematic discrimination throughout Stryker's history. We need to find former black employees who experienced discrimination at Stryker, Jasmine instructed. Not just under Bennett, but going back decades. I want to establish that this isn't about one CEO or one incident, it's about a corporate culture that needs fundamental transformation. Within days, her team had identified 17 former Stryker employees willing to share their experiences. Their stories revealed a disturbing pattern: qualified minority candidates consistently overlooked for promotion, harassment complaints buried by HR, and a compensation system that paid white employees substantially more for equivalent positions. Simultaneously, Jasmine's financial team conducted forensic accounting on Stryker's government contracts, discovering irregularities in how costs were reported and billed. Nothing explicitly criminal, but certainly questionable enough to warrant closer examination by regulatory authorities. Most damaging was the discovery of Bennett's emails discussing Washington Aerospace prior to the merger. In one exchange with board members, he referred to handling the black woman problem through a strategy of appeasement followed by systematic marginalization once the merger completed. He never intended to honor the leadership structure we negotiated, Jasmine told Amber as they reviewed the evidence. The plan was always to push me out once they had access to our technology and contracts. Amber, normally the most reserved member of the executive team, looked genuinely shocked. This goes beyond corporate maneuvering. It's blatantly discriminatory. Exactly, Jasmine agreed. And that gives us leverage beyond just the merger agreement. With a comprehensive legal case built, Jasmine worked with her team to craft the next phase of their response. Rather than releasing everything at once, they would apply pressure strategically, forcing cracks in Stryker's executive ranks and encouraging insiders to provide additional information. The first leak, evidence of pay discrimination at Stryker, went to a respected business journalist. The second, testimonials from former employees about systemic racism, was provided to a publication focused on diversity in corporate America. The third, questions about government contract billing practices, reached a reporter known for investigating corporate malfeasance. The stories broke simultaneously across different media platforms, creating a perfect storm of negative coverage that Bennett couldn't control or contain. Stryker's stock plummeted 15% in a single trading day. Customers and partners began publicly questioning their relationships with the company. Bennett's response was predictably defensive, issuing blanket denials and threatening legal action against the publications. But the damage was done. Investors were fleeing, and regulatory agencies had taken notice of the allegations regarding government contracts. As pressure mounted on Stryker, divisions emerged within their executive ranks. Two vice presidents approached Jasmine confidentially, offering information in exchange for protection in the post-merger organization. Their revelations further confirmed Bennett's personal involvement in orchestrating the campaign against her. The crisis came to a head when Washington Aerospace's board called an emergency meeting to assess the situation. Though Jasmine had their support, several members expressed concern about the escalating conflict and its potential impact on the company's reputation and operations. Some shareholders are worried we're becoming too focused on this battle with Stryker at the expense of our core business, one board member explained. They're questioning whether this has become personal rather than strategic. It was the moment Bennett had been working toward, creating enough doubt about Jasmine's leadership to undermine her position. But he had underestimated both her preparation and her resolve. Jasmine stood before the board, the exhaustion of recent weeks momentarily visible before she straightened her shoulders and transformed back into the commanding presence that had built Washington Aerospace from nothing. "This isn't about me," she began. "If it were, I would have pressed charges against Caldwell immediately and moved on. This is about something much more important: what kind of company we want to be and what kind of industry we want to work in." She walked them through the evidence her team had gathered, not just about Bennett's campaign against her, but about the systemic issues at Stryker that threatened the merged company's future. "Integration is never just about combining technologies or market share," she continued. "It's about culture. And Stryker's culture, as it currently exists, is fundamentally incompatible with our values and long-term success." She outlined her vision for using the merger not just to expand Washington Aerospace's business, but to transform the aviation industry's approach to diversity and ethical practices. "This isn't a vendetta," she concluded. "It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to show that excellence and ethics aren't mutually exclusive. That a company can stand against discrimination while delivering superior results for shareholders. That's the company I built, and that's the company I'm asking you to continue supporting." When she finished, the boardroom remained silent for several moments. Then the chairman spoke. "I believe I speak for all of us when I say that Washington Aerospace isn't just defined by its technologies or contracts, but by the principles Jasmine has embedded in our corporate DNA." He looked around the table, receiving nods of agreement. "We stand unanimously behind her leadership and approach." With the board's renewed backing, Jasmine implemented the final phase of her strategy. She instructed her team to carefully orchestrate leaks of key evidence to both authorities and media outlets, creating a comprehensive picture of Stryker's questionable practices and Bennett's personal involvement in discrimination. The impact was immediate and devastating. Regulatory agencies announced investigations into Stryker's government contracting practices. Civil rights organizations called for accountability. And most significantly, major shareholders began publicly questioning Bennett's leadership. As Stryker descended into crisis, Jasmine remained focused on her ultimate objective: not destruction, but transformation. The company had valuable assets, talented employees, and important market positions. The goal wasn't to dismantle Stryker, but to remake it as part of a combined entity that represented the best of both organizations without the toxic elements Bennett had cultivated. With this clear vision guiding her actions, Jasmine prepared for the final confrontation with the man who had orchestrated both the assault on her aircraft and the subsequent campaign to destroy her reputation. Bennett had requested a private meeting at a neutral location to resolve differences. Despite her team's concerns about the potential risks, Jasmine knew this meeting was necessary to complete what she had started. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just the future of two companies, but potentially the culture of an entire industry. The conference room at Willoughby & Stern, one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms, offered neutral territory for what promised to be a pivotal meeting. Located on the 42nd floor of a midtown skyscraper, the room featured floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the city, expensive furniture in muted tones, and the hushed atmosphere of places where power is quietly exercised. Jasmine arrived 15 minutes early, accompanied only by Amber. They had agreed that limiting participants would encourage more candid conversation. Amber arranged documents on their side of the long mahogany table while Jasmine stood at the windows, gazing at the city below. "Bennett's bringing Thomas Carlton," Amber said, checking her phone. "His personal attorney, not Stryker's general counsel." "Interesting choice," Jasmine observed. "He's separating his actions from the company." "Strategically smart," Amber acknowledged. "Carlton specializes in high-profile executive separations and discrimination cases. He's represented several CEOs in #MeToo situations." Jasmine turned from the window. "So Bennett's positioning this as a personal dispute rather than corporate malfeasance." "Exactly. Their goal will be a confidential settlement with non-disparagement clauses that protects Bennett personally, regardless of what happens to Stryker." Jasmine smiled slightly. "As I expected. At precisely 2 p.m., Harold Bennett entered with Thomas Carlton and another man Jasmine recognized as James Peterson, the lead partner at Willoughby and Stern. Bennett had clearly chosen the venue to intimidate, not realizing Jasmine had anticipated this move. Peterson had represented Washington Aerospace in its early days, before the company could afford Amber's expertise in-house. Jasmine, Peterson greeted her warmly, crossing to shake her hand. "It's been too long. Washington Aerospace has certainly flourished since those early contract negotiations." Bennett looked momentarily disconcerted by their familiar exchange. He recovered quickly, extending his hand with practiced cordiality. "Ms. Washington. Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Mr. Bennett," Jasmine replied, her handshake firm but brief. "Let's not waste time on pretense. We're here because Stryker Aviation is in crisis, and you're hoping to salvage something from the situation you created." Bennett's expression tightened, but Carlton smoothly intervened. "We're here to find a mutually beneficial resolution to what has become an unfortunate public spectacle. None of us benefits from prolonging this conflict." They settled around the table, the attorneys arranging documents while Jasmine and Bennett sized each other up across the polished surface. Bennett appeared outwardly confident, but Jasmine noted subtle signs of strain. The slight tension around his eyes, the way his fingers repeatedly adjusted his French cuffs. "I'll be direct," Bennett began. "This situation has escalated beyond what anyone intended. The merger agreement remains valuable to both companies, but the current atmosphere makes integration challenging. We propose a structured settlement that allows everyone to move forward productively." Carlton slid a document across the table. "A revised merger agreement that preserves the core business combination while adjusting certain leadership elements, along with mutual non-disclosure and non-disparagement provisions." Amber reviewed the document briefly before passing it to Jasmine, who gave it only a cursory glance. "Let me understand what you're proposing," Jasmine said, her voice measured. "After your executive physically assaulted me, after you orchestrated a campaign to discredit me professionally and personally, after you attempted to manipulate my company's stock price and access our systems illegally, you want me to sign an agreement that essentially allows you to continue leading the combined entity while I step into a ceremonial role until I can be quietly removed." Bennett shifted slightly. "That's a rather dramatic characterization." "Is it?" Jasmine interrupted. "Section 4.3 stipulates that I transition to strategic advisor within 6 months. Section 5.7 gives you unilateral authority over all executive appointments. And Section 8.2 prevents me from discussing any aspect of Stryker's corporate culture or practices, even within the combined company." She slid the document back across the table. "You're not offering a settlement. You're offering surrender with a golden parachute." "Be reasonable, Jasmine," Bennett said, leaning forward. "The aviation industry has certain established ways of operating. Your technologies are impressive, but integration requires experience and relationships that, frankly, you don't have." "You mean relationships with people who look like you and come from backgrounds like yours," Jasmine replied evenly. "The established ways that have kept aerospace one of the least diverse industries in America." Bennett's expression hardened. "This isn't about race. It's about business reality." "It's about both," Jasmine countered. "And your emails discussing how to handle the black woman problem make that abundantly clear." Carlton intervened quickly. "We should focus on finding common ground rather than rehashing controversies." "I agree," Jasmine said, surprising them. "So let me be clear about where that common ground might exist." She opened a folder and removed a single sheet of paper. "This is what I'm prepared to offer." Bennett took the document, his expression changing as he read. "This is completely unacceptable. You're demanding my immediate resignation and forfeiture of all post-merger compensation. Along with a comprehensive transformation of Stryker's corporate culture and practices," Jasmine added. "Including independent review of all hiring, promotion, and compensation decisions for the past 5 years to identify and remediate discriminatory patterns." "This is extortion," Bennett said, his voice rising. "No, Harold," Jasmine replied calmly. "This is accountability." She removed a small device from her pocket and placed it on the table. "By the way, I'm recording this conversation, with Mr. Peterson's knowledge and consent as the owner of these premises." She nodded toward the senior attorney, who confirmed with a slight nod. "That's illegal in New York without all parties' consent," Carlton interjected quickly. "Actually," Amber corrected, "Mr. Peterson's client engagement letter for this meeting space, which your firm signed, includes consent to recording for security purposes. I'd be happy to show you the clause." Bennett's face flushed with anger. "This is precisely the kind of underhanded tactic." "Underhanded?" Jasmine interrupted, her composure unshaken. "Let's talk about underhanded tactics, Harold." She opened her laptop and turned the screen toward him. "These are emails between you and Ryan Caldwell before the merger was announced, discussing how to handle me once the deal was completed. Note the specific instruction to test her composure during integration planning." She switched to another document. "This is the forensic analysis showing Stryker funds were used to pay my former colleague to fabricate claims about my research. And this," she continued, displaying a third screen, "is evidence that the private security firm following my COO and attempting to access our systems was hired through a shell company you control." Bennett's expression shifted from anger to wariness. Carlton placed a restraining hand on his client's arm, whispering something urgently. "You've built an impressive narrative," Bennett said after composing himself. "But allegations aren't evidence. If you're threatening litigation—" "I'm not threatening anything," Jasmine corrected him. "I'm informing you of facts you should consider while deciding your next move." She closed her laptop. "But since you mentioned evidence, perhaps we should discuss what the FBI found when they executed search warrants at Stryker offices this morning." The blood drained from Bennett's face. "What?" "Simultaneous raids at your headquarters and 3 regional offices," Jasmine confirmed. "They're particularly interested in documentation related to government contract billing practices and communications regarding discriminatory hiring and promotion decisions." Carlton looked genuinely shocked. "My client hasn't been informed of any federal investigation." "That's often how search warrants work," Amber noted. "The investigation has been ongoing for some time, with Washington Aerospace's full cooperation." Bennett's composure finally cracked completely. "You set this up," he accused, pointing a shaking finger at Jasmine. "From the beginning, the incident with Caldwell, the leaked stories, all of it, you manipulated events to create this situation." "No, Harold," Jasmine replied, her voice steady. "You created this situation through decades of discriminatory practices and dishonest business tactics. I simply refuse to be your victim." She stood, gathering her materials. "You have 24 hours to accept my terms, including your resignation and full cooperation with all investigations. After that, in addition to whatever legal consequences arise from the FBI investigation, I will personally ensure that every customer, investor, and regulator understands exactly who you are and how you've operated." "You're destroying a company that's existed for over 70 years, Bennett protested. "Thousands of jobs." "I'm saving a company you've compromised through your actions," Jasmine corrected him. "Every employee at Stryker deserves better leadership than you've provided." As she turned to leave, Bennett made one final desperate attempt. "This isn't over. I still have relationships you can't touch. People who understand how business really works. You have no idea what I can do to you personally if you pursue this vendetta." Jasmine paused at the door, turning back with a smile that contained no warmth. "You should have researched me more carefully before you chose me as an enemy, Harold. I don't make threats. I don't need to." She checked her watch. 24 hours. "I suggest you use them wisely." In the elevator descending to the lobby, Amber finally relaxed her professional demeanor. "That was masterful. The timing with the FBI raids, perfect." "Thank you," Jasmine replied. Though I can't take credit for the timing. That was the Bureau's decision once they had sufficient evidence. Do you think he'll accept your terms? Jasmine considered for a moment. His ego wants to fight. But his survival instinct is stronger. By morning, he'll be negotiating the details of his exit. Her prediction proved accurate. At 6:30 a.m. the following day, Jasmine received a call from Stryker's lead independent director. Bennett had submitted his resignation, effective immediately, and the board was prepared to accept all terms of Jasmine's proposal for leadership transition and cultural transformation. The news of Bennett's resignation broke by mid-morning, sending shockwaves through the aviation industry. Stryker's stock stabilized after an initial drop, as market analysts recognized that removing Bennett ultimately strengthened the merger's prospects. By afternoon, Jasmine had convened a joint meeting of key executives from both companies, excluding those most closely aligned with Bennett's discriminatory practices. She laid out her vision for the combined organization, one that would maintain Stryker's valuable legacy and relationships while infusing Washington Aerospace's innovative technologies and inclusive culture. This merger was never about one person or one incident, she told them. It's about creating an aviation company that leads the industry not just in technology and market share, but in workplace culture and ethical standards. The response was cautiously positive, with even longtime Stryker executives recognizing that change was inevitable and potentially beneficial. As the meeting concluded, one veteran Stryker vice president approached Jasmine privately. "I've been with the company 22 years, he told her. "Seen a lot of leadership styles. Never thought I'd report to." He hesitated, catching himself. "To a black woman?" Jasmine finished for him, her expression neutral. He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yes. And I'm not proud of that prejudice. But after seeing how you've handled this situation, the strategic thinking, the preparation, the execution, I believe you're exactly what this company needs." It was a small moment of validation, but it represented the beginning of the cultural transformation Jasmine had fought for. Not instant conversion, but openness to change, the essential first step. Later that evening, Jasmine called Terrence, who remained in Chicago overseeing Beatrice's care during her rehabilitation. "Bennett's out," she told him simply. "Never doubted it," Terrence replied. "How's the response internally?" "Mixed, but trending positive. The Stryker old guard is shell-shocked, but the younger executives seem relieved. The rank-and-file employees are cautiously optimistic, especially the minorities who've been marginalized under Bennett. And the FBI investigation? Continuing. My guess is it ends with significant fines rather than criminal charges, unless they find something we haven't uncovered." There was a pause before Terrence asked the question that mattered most. "How are you?" Jasmine considered before answering truthfully. "Exhausted. Satisfied. Ready for the real work to begin." "You've earned a break," Terrence suggested. "The integration can wait a few days." "Maybe," Jasmine acknowledged. "First, I need to share the news with Grandma." "How is she today?" "Getting stronger. The therapists are impressed with her progress. She asked about you this morning, wanted to know if you'd finished the job yet." Jasmine laughed, the sound conveying genuine relief and joy for the first time in weeks. "Tell her mission accomplished. And tell her I'll be there tomorrow to give her the full story." As she ended the call, Jasmine walked to the window of her Manhattan office, gazing at the city lights twinkling in the early evening darkness. The bruise on her cheek had faded completely, but its impact continued to resonate through both companies and potentially the entire industry. What had begun as a moment of shocking violence had catalyzed a transformation that might never have occurred otherwise. The path forward would not be easy, meaningful change never was. But for the first time since the incident on her aircraft, Jasmine felt certain they were moving in the right direction. The hidden evidence had been brought to light. The long-entrenched discrimination had been exposed. And most importantly, the opportunity to build something better from the wreckage of the old system now lay before her. 3 months after Bennett's resignation, Washington Aerospace's headquarters hummed with the energy of transformation. The 43rd floor, once reserved exclusively for Washington executives, now housed integrated teams from both companies, their workspaces arranged to facilitate collaboration rather than reinforce hierarchy. The merger, officially completed 6 weeks earlier, had created the third-largest aerospace company in America, with Washington Stryker Aviation projected to reach the top position within 5 years. Jasmine stood at the window of her office, watching a Washington Stryker jet take off from LaGuardia, its distinctive new livery, the merged company's logo in metallic blue against a pearl-white fuselage, gleaming in the autumn sunlight. The sight brought a sense of satisfaction that transcended the mere business achievement. That aircraft represented not just a combined entity but a new approach to an industry that had resisted change for decades. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Terrence entered, carrying a tablet with the latest integration metrics. Manufacturing efficiency up 12% since implementing the hybrid process model, he reported. And applications from women and minority engineers have increased 68% since the announcement of our new university partnership program. And the legacy Stryker executives? Jasmine asked, turning from the window. Still adjusting, Terrence acknowledged with a slight smile. Johnson and Perez have embraced the new culture completely. Matthews and Wilson are making genuine efforts. The rest are complying, if not enthusiastically. Compliance is a start, Jasmine said. Cultural transformation doesn't happen overnight. She returned to her desk, reviewing the agenda for the afternoon's board meeting, the first to include the 4 new directors appointed as part of the governance restructuring. 2 were women, 1 black and 1 Latina, with extensive aerospace experience. The other 2 were men with backgrounds in technology innovation and ethical business practices. "How's your grandmother?" Terrence asked, setting aside the tablet. Jasmine's expression softened. "Remarkable. The doctors call her recovery exceptional for a patient of any age. She's back home, hosting her book club and directing her neighborhood association as if nothing happened." "She's where you get your resilience," Terrence observed. "Among other things," Jasmine agreed. She glanced at her watch. "The federal prosecutors called this morning. They want another meeting about the Stryker case." After Bennett's resignation, the FBI investigation had expanded significantly. What began as an inquiry into potentially discriminatory practices had uncovered questionable billing procedures on government contracts, improper relationships with foreign entities, and systematic efforts to conceal these activities from regulators and shareholders. "What's their focus now?" Terrence asked. "They're building a case against Bennett personally, not just Stryker as a corporate entity," Jasmine explained. "They believe he was the driving force behind the most problematic practices. They want my testimony about his attempts to manipulate the merger and subsequent efforts to discredit me." Before Terrence could respond, Amber entered with an expression that immediately captured their attention. "We've got a situation," she announced. "Bennett's called a press conference for tomorrow morning. His representatives are being vague about the topic, but our sources indicate he plans to publicly challenge the merger and make allegations about how you orchestrated his removal." Jasmine absorbed this information calmly. After 3 months of silence, he chooses now to resurface, just as the federal case against him is solidifying. Not a coincidence. It's a desperate move, Terrence agreed. But he still has connections in conservative media and with certain investors. He could create complications. Or, Jasmine suggested, he could provide us the perfect opportunity to close this chapter definitively. She turned to Amber. "Contact Bennett's attorney. Tell him I'm willing to meet with Bennett privately before his press conference, neutral location, no attorneys, just the 2 of us." Both Terrence and Amber looked alarmed. "That's extremely risky," Amber cautioned. "Whatever he says could be twisted later without witnesses." "Not if I control the environment," Jasmine replied. She outlined her plan quickly, addressing their concerns with the same strategic precision that had guided her through the merger crisis. By the time she finished, both had reluctantly agreed to her approach. The following morning, Harold Bennett arrived at the Greenwich, an exclusive Manhattan restaurant known for its private dining rooms and discretion with high-profile guests. The establishment hadn't yet opened for regular service, ensuring complete privacy for the meeting Jasmine had arranged. Bennett entered looking significantly different than during their last encounter. 3 months without his executive position had taken a visible toll. Though still impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, he had lost weight, and his previously confident bearing now seemed forced rather than natural. The arrogance remained, however, evident in his expression as he spotted Jasmine waiting at a corner table. "Ms. Washington," he said, approaching with calculated casualness. "I must admit I was surprised by your invitation." "Mr. Bennett," Jasmine replied, not rising from her seat. "Thank you for coming. Please, join me." As Bennett sat across from her, a waiter appeared silently, pouring water and then disappearing without a word. The room contained only the table, 2 chairs, and minimal decoration, nothing to distract from the conversation about to take place. "I understand you've scheduled a press conference," Jasmine began directly. "Before you proceed with whatever you're planning, I thought we might have one final private conversation." Bennett studied her, trying to discern her motivation. "A settlement offer?" "It's rather late for that." "Not a settlement," Jasmine corrected. "Clarity. About where things stand and what happens next." "What happens next," Bennett said, leaning forward slightly, "is that I correct the public record about how you manipulated the situation to seize control of Stryker. How you exploited an unfortunate incident to orchestrate a takeover that has damaged a great American company." Jasmine regarded him calmly. "Is that really the narrative you want to present publicly? That you were somehow the victim in this situation? The merger was proceeding according to agreed terms until you decided to use Caldwell's inexcusable but isolated action to force me out," Bennett replied. "You created a false narrative about systemic problems to justify a purge of experienced leadership." "Isolated action," Jasmine repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting characterization of events." She opened a small portfolio on the table and removed a document. "This is a transcript of your instructions to Caldwell before the integration meeting on my aircraft. You specifically told him to test her limits and see how she handles real pressure." Bennett's expression flickered briefly before he regained composure. "Business negotiations are often stressful. I simply wanted to ensure you could handle difficult discussions. Nothing in that communication directed physical confrontation." "Perhaps not explicitly," Jasmine acknowledged. "But when combined with your history of using Caldwell as your proxy for confrontational tactics, and your documented discussions about finding ways to trigger the conduct detrimental clause in our merger agreement, a different picture emerges." She removed another document from her portfolio. "The federal investigators have been quite thorough in reviewing Stryker's internal communications. This email chain is particularly interesting, you and 3 board members discussing how to solve the diversity problem once the merger completed." Bennett's face hardened. "You've clearly decided on your narrative, regardless of context or business realities. What exactly is the point of this meeting? To threaten me into silence?" "Not at all," Jasmine replied. "You're free to hold your press conference and say whatever you believe serves your interests. I simply wanted to ensure you're making a fully informed decision." She gestured around the empty restaurant. "You might be wondering why I suggested meeting here, without attorneys or witnesses. It's because I wanted to speak to you honestly, without the constraints of legal advisors or public performance." "And what truth did you want to share?" Bennett asked, skepticism evident in his tone. Jasmine leaned forward slightly. "That I understand you, Harold. Better than you might think." Bennett scoffed. "I doubt that very much. I understand that you built your career in an industry where people who looked like you dominated every leadership position. Where challenging that homogeneity was seen as threatening rather than strengthening the business. Where your networks and connections mattered more than performance metrics." She continued before he could interrupt. I understand that when Washington Aerospace began outperforming traditional companies like Stryker, it challenged your fundamental assumptions about who belongs in leadership. And when a black woman acquired your company, it represented everything you've spent your career resisting. This amateur psychology is beneath you, Bennett said dismissively, though his rigid posture betrayed tension. Then let me be direct, Jasmine replied. You're planning to publicly attack me and the merger because you believe it's your best defense against the federal investigation. Create enough doubt about my motives and methods, and perhaps prosecutors will hesitate or shareholders will pressure for a settlement. She closed her portfolio deliberately. It won't work. The evidence against you is substantial and growing daily. Former colleagues are cooperating with investigators. Financial records are being traced through your elaborate but ultimately transparent shell structures. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Bennett's face. You have no idea what evidence exists or doesn't exist. Actually, I do, Jasmine countered. Because unlike you, I've been fully cooperating with federal authorities since they began their investigation. I've provided every document, every communication, every piece of evidence they've requested, because I have nothing to hide. She let this statement hang in the air before continuing. Your press conference won't change the trajectory of the federal case. It will only add, making false public statements to the growing list of problematic behaviors prosecutors are examining. Bennett's composure finally cracked. You think you've won, he said, anger seeping into his voice. That you can dismantle decades of my work and reputation while positioning yourself as some kind of corporate reformer. But this industry has a long memory, Jasmine. People who matter, people with real influence, understand what you've really done. What I've done, Jasmine replied evenly, is expose practices that should never have been accepted in the first place. Discrimination isn't a business strategy, Harold. It's a liability, morally, legally, and financially. She stood, indicating the meeting was concluding. You have a choice to make before your press conference. Continue fighting a battle you've already lost, adding potential new charges in the process. Or accept reality, cooperate with authorities, and perhaps salvage something from this situation. Bennett remained seated, staring up at her with a mixture of anger and dawning comprehension. You're recording this conversation. Jasmine nodded once. With your knowledge and consent, according to New York law. I never consented, he began. The private dining agreement you signed upon arrival includes consent for security recording, Jasmine interrupted. Your attorney should really review documents more carefully before advising you to sign them. The blood drained from Bennett's face as he realized the extent of his miscalculation. This was a setup. No, Harold, Jasmine corrected him. This was an opportunity, for you to recognize your situation clearly and make better choices than you have so far. Whether you take that opportunity is entirely your decision. She moved toward the door, then paused. By the way, federal agents are executing additional search warrants as we speak, your home office, your vacation property in the Hamptons, and your private storage facility in Connecticut. I believe they're particularly interested in the offshore account documentation you keep in your personal safe. Bennett's shock was evident. How could you possibly know about? He stopped abruptly, realizing he was verifying the existence of precisely what investigators were seeking. As I said earlier, Jasmine replied with a small, cold smile, you should have researched me more carefully before choosing me as an enemy. My team is extraordinarily thorough. She opened the door, where Derek Sullivan waited discreetly. Goodbye, Harold. I doubt we'll speak again, but I wish you luck with your press conference decision. Choose wisely. 3 hours later, Bennett's attorney issued a brief statement announcing the cancellation of the planned press conference due to new developments requiring Mr. Bennett's immediate attention. By evening, news broke that Bennett was in discussions with federal prosecutors regarding potential cooperation in exchange for consideration during sentencing. The final confrontation between Jasmine Washington and Harold Bennett had lasted less than 30 minutes, but its impact would reverberate through corporate America for years to come. Not because of dramatic revelations or explosive accusations, but because of something far more powerful, the methodical, irrefutable exposure of truth that had been hidden for decades. As Jasmine returned to Washington Stryker headquarters following the meeting, she felt no triumph or vindication. Only the quiet satisfaction of having completed what she had started, and the knowledge that the real work, transforming not just one company but an industry's culture, was now fully underway. 3 months later, Jasmine stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her expanded office in Washington Stryker's headquarters. The winter sun cast long shadows across Manhattan, illuminating the company's newly redesigned logo on the building across the street, the merged WS symbol that had quickly become recognized throughout the aviation industry as representing both technological innovation and cultural transformation. On the television mounted on her office wall, a news anchor reported on the latest development in the Bennett case. Former Stryker Aviation CEO Harold Bennett pleaded guilty today to multiple federal charges including securities fraud, conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. Under the plea agreement, Bennett will serve 4 years in federal prison and pay $47 million in fines and restitution. Prosecutors cited his eventual cooperation in the ongoing investigation into industry-wide discriminatory practices as a factor in the reduced sentence. Jasmine watched the report with a neutral expression. Bennett's downfall brought her no pleasure, only confirmation that accountability was possible even at the highest levels of corporate America. She turned away from the television as Amber entered with the quarterly integration report. Manufacturing efficiency up 22% from pre-merger levels, Amber announced, handing Jasmine the detailed analysis. Customer retention at 97%, exceeding projections by 12 points. And the diversity initiative metrics are particularly impressive, minority hiring up 68%, with retention rates tracking significantly above industry averages. And the corporate culture survey? Jasmine asked, turning to the section that mattered most to her personally. Former Stryker employees report a 78% improvement in workplace inclusion and equal opportunity measures, Amber replied. Not perfect, but remarkable progress in just 6 months. Jasmine nodded, satisfied with the trajectory if not yet the destination. The cultural transformation will take longest. We're changing mindsets and behaviors established over generations. Speaking of transformation, Amber said, the Washington Stryker Foundation Board has approved all your proposed initiatives for the Minority Engineering Scholarship Program. 10 universities have already signed partnership agreements. The foundation represented one of Jasmine's most significant post-merger innovations, a $100 million commitment to support minorities entering aerospace engineering and leadership development programs for women and people of color already in the industry. What had begun as her personal response to decades of exclusionary practices was evolving into an industry-wide movement for greater inclusion and diversity. Excellent, Jasmine replied. I want the first scholarships awarded before the next academic year. As Amber departed, Jasmine's phone rang with the specific tone reserved for family calls. She answered immediately. How's my corporate warrior? Beatrice Washington asked, her voice strong and clear despite her recent health challenges. Busy but good, Jasmine replied, her formal business demeanor softening as it always did with her grandmother. How are you feeling? Ready for the dedication ceremony tomorrow? Child, I've been ready, Beatrice assured her. Got my new dress pressed and everything. Just make sure that photographer gets my good side. Jasmine laughed. All your sides are good, Grandma. Flattery will get you everywhere, Beatrice chuckled. I saw the news about Bennett. For years seems light for what he did. The justice system isn't perfect, Jasmine acknowledged. But the impact goes far beyond his personal punishment. The case has opened investigations into similar practices at 3 other major aviation companies. The industry is finally facing its discrimination problems directly. Because you forced them to, Beatrice noted with evident pride. One slap changed everything. The slap was just the catalyst, Jasmine corrected gently. The change was already necessary and overdue. It just needed someone willing to demand it, regardless of the personal cost. After ending the call, Jasmine returned to the window, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The initial assault had faded from headlines, but its ripple effects continued to transform not just Washington Stryker but the broader corporate landscape. 3 major companies had replaced CEOs following internal investigations into discriminatory practices. Industry associations had implemented new diversity requirements for membership and leadership positions. Government contractors faced enhanced scrutiny regarding workplace equity metrics. A knock at her door interrupted these reflections. Terrence entered, his expression conveying good news before he spoke. "It's official," he announced. Fortune's Businessperson of the Year. The editorial board was unanimous. Jasmine accepted this information with characteristic composure, though the recognition meant more than she would publicly acknowledge. Not for the personal accolade, but for the validation of her approach to business and leadership. "The article is excellent," Terrence continued, handing her a preview copy of the magazine. They focused on both the business results and the cultural transformation. "They're calling Washington Stryker the template for 21st century corporate integration, and you the CEO who transformed crisis into opportunity for systematic change." Jasmine scanned the article, pausing at a quote from a former Stryker executive: "Washington didn't just acquire a company. She reimagined what a modern aerospace corporation could be, more innovative, more inclusive, and ultimately more profitable because of those changes." "Not bad for a girl from South Chicago," she murmured, setting the magazine aside. "Speaking of South Chicago," Terrence said, "the community center renovation is complete. Ready for your inspection before tomorrow's dedication." The Beatrice Washington Center for Science and Engineering represented another facet of Jasmine's response to the merger crisis. Using personal funds rather than corporate resources, she had transformed the aging community center where she had first discovered her love of science into a state-of-the-art facility for underserved youth. Tomorrow's dedication ceremony would officially open the center to the community that had shaped her early life. "Let's head over there now," Jasmine decided, gathering her coat. "I want to make sure everything's perfect for Grandma tomorrow." An hour later, Jasmine's private jet prepared for takeoff from Teterboro Airport, bound for Chicago. As she settled into her seat, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window, specifically, the place where Caldwell's hand had left its mark months earlier. The bruise had faded completely, leaving no physical trace of the assault that had catalyzed so much change. Jasmine touched the spot briefly, remembering not the pain or humiliation of that moment, but the clarity it had provided. Some incidents revealed character rather than defining it. Some confrontations led to transformation rather than mere conflict. As the jet accelerated down the runway, Jasmine Washington looked forward rather than back, focused on the future she was helping to create. The aviation industry would never return to its old patterns of exclusion and discrimination. Not because one CEO had taken a stand, but because that stand had inspired countless others to demand the same accountability and change within their own organizations. The next day, standing beside her grandmother at the dedication ceremony for the Beatrice Washington Center, Jasmine addressed the gathered community members, students, and media representatives. "This center represents more than educational opportunity," she told them. "It represents the belief that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity does not, and that we have a responsibility to change that reality." She gestured to the state-of-the-art facilities visible through the center's glass walls. "When I was growing up in this neighborhood, I had to fight for access to resources that more privileged children took for granted. Today, we're ensuring that the next generation of scientists, engineers, and business leaders can focus on developing their talents rather than overcoming artificial barriers." Beatrice, elegant in her new dress despite her recent health challenges, beamed with pride as she cut the ceremonial ribbon. The applause was thunderous, reflecting not just respect for Jasmine's professional achievements, but genuine appreciation for her commitment to the community that had shaped her. Later, as they toured the completed facility, Beatrice took her granddaughter's arm and spoke quietly. "You know what makes me proudest?" she asked. "What's that, Grandma?" "That when they hit you, you didn't just hit back," Beatrice said. You changed the whole game so nobody else would have to fight the same battle. Jasmine smiled, recognizing the wisdom in her grandmother's observation. The true measure of her response to Bennett and Caldwell wasn't the personal vindication or professional ascendance it had brought her. It was the systematic change that would benefit countless others who would never have to experience what she had endured. That evening, aboard her jet returning to New York, Jasmine reviewed plans for Washington Stryker's next major initiative, an unprecedented investment in sustainable aviation technologies that promised to reduce the industry's carbon footprint by 30% within a decade. The project represented exactly the kind of innovation the merged company had been created to pursue: bold, forward-thinking, and potentially transformative for the entire industry. As she worked, Jasmine caught another glimpse of her reflection in the window, this time noticing not the absence of the bruise but the presence of something else, a quiet confidence that came from having faced the worst the corporate world could throw at her and emerging stronger, more focused, and more determined to create lasting change. Some marks faded. Some changes were forever. Jasmine Washington's story teaches us that true leadership isn't about avoiding conflict but transforming it into opportunity. When faced with discrimination, she didn't just seek personal justice, she leveraged the moment to create systemic change. Her approach demonstrates that responding to injustice strategically is more powerful than reacting emotionally. The narrative also highlights how discrimination often thrives in environments where it remains unchallenged. By refusing to accept the established ways of an industry, Jasmine forced accountability that benefited countless others beyond herself. Perhaps most importantly, her journey illustrates that preparation and excellence are non-negotiable when challenging entrenched power structures. Jasmine succeeded not just because she was right, but because she was exceptional. Her company's performance, her strategic foresight, and her impeccable documentation left her opponents no viable defense. Finally, this story reminds us that transformative change rarely comes without personal cost. Jasmine risked her reputation, her company, and even her health in pursuit of justice. Yet by staying true to her grandmother's wisdom, "Don't let someone else's hatred define your success," she emerged stronger and created a legacy that extended far beyond business achievements. What do you think about Jasmine's approach to corporate justice? Comment below if you believe she handled the situation perfectly, or if you think there was another way she could have responded to the discrimination she faced. Hit that like button if you found inspiration in her strategic brilliance, and subscribe for more incredible stories of people who turned adversity into advantage. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as impossible situations. Thank you for watching, and remember, your response to challenges reveals your true character far more than the challenges themselves.